What's up, everybody? It's your host, Dylan Conroy. So, hey, man, we're back with a different format for today. This is going to be put out just across the live stream. This is not going to be a podcast. But recently, my good friend, John Lockmer, who you see here with me, reached out to me because he was interested in getting some sales coaching for me. He's seen some of the content that been putting out on the podcast and over social. And he is a long time marketing guy who's mainly been on the tech side. Was early in programmatic. We met over 15 years ago when he was a direct partner. So we've been hanging out for a long time and doing business for a long time. But as a lot of us, as we progress in our careers, we go in and out of roles where the expectation is to, ring the closing bell, so to speak. So, sometimes we're in a fully operational role where we're just interfacing with clients. Sometimes we're on the delivery side. But as you get higher and higher in your career, sometimes the burden of being the rainmaker and generating sales is going to be either the exclusive focus of your role, or it's definitely going to be part and parcel of your role. So John has found himself in a new role as the executive producer at Buck Wild Media, where I'll let him tee up the intro a little bit. But my understanding of Buck Wild is these are some guys that spun out of, the Harmon brothers, some of the production companies out in Utah that are well known for the long form kind of zany advertising where they'll do a 1 hour ad and all sorts of crazy stuff happens in the ad. A lot of what was originally kind of harkened back to the Dollar Shave era of that more long form ads that are worth watching, ads that you don't want to skip. So hopefully I didn't butcher the intro too much, John, but so today we're going to go back and forth. John's prepared some questions for me to essentially answer that he has questions about, from my perspective as a sales leader for over 15 years in the media and advertising space. And then I've got some questions for John around his process, how he's doing business development today. But John, why don't we just start off with an intro? Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, a little bit of your background, and then let's talk about what you're doing today at Buck Wild.
Absolutely. As Dylan said, I started in the programmatic side, really in the technology side. Wanted to get into the details, but after a while, technology lets you down. We know about FANG and the different things that block our ability to actually co-track, and make sure that the clients are taken care of. While doing that, I eventually became a media director for multiple agencies. The last one being Dumont Project, where we got to do consultancy for major brands, Fortune 500 brands, and nonprofits in doing $1 billion in media. And so but more recently, I think as I've been doing that part time, I've been mentored by, actually it was my first agency was Colville Fuller before Direct Partners, and Lee Colville has really been kind of mentoring me as far as the creative side. I've been doing film on the side, and so really video production. And so as I've been starting to win awards, I realized, hey, wait a minute, hey, this is something that I have a knack for, that's natural to me. And while that was happening, I've always been a fan of Harmon Brothers, what they do, and I feel like it's extremely viable for our time to produce content that that is entertaining, at the same time informative, and really, just showing just solid good products. And so, I'm friends with James, and spoke to James, and so in short, yes, I'm doing production here too, but I'm also doing business development, trying to use my contacts that I've worked with in the past, that I know, hey, this would be a great fit for you. Let's connect, let's talk. So going into my Rolodex of contacts of people that I already know, that I trust, to see how we can possibly help them work together, enhance what they do, as well as using a lot of automated tactics. LinkedIn is really powerful tool, right? So leveraging LinkedIn to connect with various CMOs and introduce myself, say, hey, if you need me, I'm here. Really, I think as I met with as a franchisee president this week, as we were kind of talking about how they're really successful within one region, where they were like the known company within San Diego. but when they started branching out to other places, it wasn't quite the same thing. And so I think the question was, we know we're setting up the camp at the right demographics with the right people, and we're selling the stuff, but we're not having the success we're having that we're having in San Diego. And so really it came down to, if that's the case, then people just don't know you're there a lot of times. And that's what marketing is a lot of it is like, how do I make myself known? Because how will people know they need me unless they know I have, we've all seen that cartoon where the guy's selling the machine gun while they're fighting the war, and the guy says, "No, I don't have time for you," right? And it's like, and so just really, and it goes out to my first question is, how do I qualify prospects to ensure that they're the right fit for the product? I don't just want to, shove something down your throat that I know you're absolutely not going to need. And so again, right now so far, I'm starting with, hey, let me target CMOs and see where they're at and see if I can, do it. Also leverage my old network, right? You and other people that I know that have been really successful in the sales arena, and say, how can I hang out with you guys? What can we do? Right. I think you did that VidCon thing. Hey, can we hang out at VidCon? I actually have done, and I'll share an additional hack of VidCon, how you can get in.
Let's go. The more VidCon hacks, the better, because we're about to, after I get off the phone with you, I'm going to be doing a little bit more prep and getting on the road at about 1:30 today to head down to Anaheim. So all the tips that my audience could use, I'm sure they would enjoy it. So go for it.
Absolutely. Well, you want me to give you the tip right now?
Yeah, let's do it. And
all right. So a lot of people don't know that if you are a nonprofit, you get an 80% off discount for a booth.
Oh, wow.
So that in itself is a huge. So if you're a brand, right, my recommendation is find a nonprofit that you like. Tell them, hey, we'll sponsor your booth, right? But then you can hang out with a nonprofit that you sponsor.
I love that, man. That's
dude. I come like in college. I was part of a group, like a organization. It was a nonprofit Christian group, and we had zero budget, but we would do a bunch of things. People thought I had like this huge budgets, because they're like, we're doing these, because they would get $10,000 to do events, and 50 people would show up, and I would do events and I would get 500 people to show up. And so people thought, but it really was like me in my backyard with a giant plot printer that I bought on used. So all our posters would be printed, and 5 other people. But we made, so I know how to be scrappy, grassroots, and how to, like, when I wanted to get into, what is it called? E3. Remember E3?
Yeah. I think some version of it just happened again. I don't think it's called E3 anymore, but
it's not called E3. But when it first came out, I literally created my own company, my own letterhead, made myself president. I even got a business license and printed small. So I got in for free, and I would get free products, etc. And I got to meet, like, the first 2 E3s were amazing because you got to meet all the decision makers. After that, it just became kind of like this show. But I remember, and I'll stop with this because I love sharing these stories.
Keep riffing.
My favorite. I was into 3D animation at the time, and it was really expensive. Like, you literally had to spend $30,000 for the hardware and an additional $30,000 for the software. So I'm like, dude, I'm gonna go there, hang out with these guys, and see if they can help me. So the first booth that I go to is Soft Image 3D, and I'm excited. Yeah, I was like 19. I was like 19. I printed like 1,000. I found like a Games for Less, I think, was a company in Anaheim that I got them to sponsor my first issue. My uncle had a printing press. I printed it through there. Anyhow, I'm inside. I go to this booth, wide-eyed, thinking Soft Image is the future, and so I get to the front. I go, "Excuse me, sir, is this Soft Image?" And he looks at me. He goes, "No, it's not." And I'm like, "What?" And he says, "It's Soft Image." Wow. And I'm like, I'm done with you guys. What kind of snobbery? And so I went to the AutoCAD 3D Studio 3D. Before, I think it was before they got bought out. But anyhow, so that was my foray into the business world, into networking, and 3D Studio Max. I was like, forget you guys. I'm gonna go to 3D Studio Max. I want to deal with you guys after that attitude. But anyhow, so I've always been a hack. I've always been like, how do I get in? I remember one year. I think if you and you, I'm sure you're natural at this, right? if you act like you belong there, people don't mess with you. I think
Yeah.
one year I really wanted to go. One year I really wanted to go to E3. I didn't have time, so I think I left work early. I was dressed kind of in a suit, and I literally just walked in, and nobody bothered me.
Yep. Yeah.
Anyhow, but it's fun. It's fun to do that stuff.
No, you're right. It is fun. I think as a business development person, and I think we'll get into a question that you answered that will kind of dovetail into this, but gamification is really important. Video game mechanics and what you're talking about. Like if you can't make sales and biz dev fun, then you're going to drive yourself crazy because at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. It's about constantly getting rejected. You got to talk to 100 people every single day to want to go. You gotta have 100 touch points in order to find a customer. I think that's really the law of averages. There are ways to increase your success ratio, but for me, everything's about gamification. You talked about the element of like automation. I'm a big fan of AI and how AI is changing the sales industry. A lot of people are pissed because it's creating more and more noise. It's creating more and more spam. And look, I feel bad for clients. I went and interviewed the chief marketing officer of Shopify in Toronto, and he told me, he's like, Dylan, I get 800 emails a day and I have no mechanism in how to like sort out like what's good in my inbox. I'm absolutely certain that there are great companies, there are great vendors, there are really cool people that are reaching out to me wanting to do business, but I have no mechanism in which to evaluate that. So I basically, if I don't know you, I hit the delete button. And the way that he essentially allows things to percolate up to his level of awareness is really just through referrals. Like if he doesn't know you and you don't come in introduced through somebody who he respects and has some type of a relationship with, anything cold is basically going to get unanswered. So that's tough, right? That's tough for sales guys to hear that and to know that there's like no chance in hell with like a CMO. But, in that same conversation, I sent him a cold email to ask if he wanted to come on my podcast. And he certainly saw that one. And he said, yeah, man, I would love to do the show. Back in the day when I first started the podcast, instead of doing it like on a remote platform, like what we're doing right now, when it was audio only, I used to jump on a plane and actually go to their office and to do it in person. There's two reasons that I wanted to do that. One, I think there's a chemistry component that when you do a podcast, like it's great that we have all these cool technologies that allow us to stream out and like have a decent production setup from our home. And I wouldn't give that up for the world because it allows me to accomplish volume. It allows me to sit here in San Diego and have a show, and then you're up in LA. But when the opportunity presents itself, the production value of, this from being a production guy, not only the production value of being able to like set up a great studio environment, it just elevates the content immensely. But more importantly, there's a chemistry perspective. I'm not doing this podcast because I want to be the next Gary Vee and I think I'm going to get, 10 billion views on every episode. Really, at the end of the day, it's about meeting really cool guests. If all I did was press the button and the guests didn't even know that the podcast existed, and all I did is get an opportunity to meet them, the podcast would be worth it. If my audience was me and the other guests and I set up a bunch of cameras just to make him think he was doing a podcast, that would be fine. So, I digress a little bit, and we'll get into that idea of like, how do you leverage content? And especially a guy like you that works at a production company, like you're at a huge advantage over someone like me who's DIYing it. But I want to jump into specifically, your first question around qualification. So I think, qualification, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, but I think you have to really figure out like different ICPs to test and then figure out like where you get traction. What I do in my current setup is I look at my different clients that I'm prospecting on behalf of, and then I set up ICPs with like different types of audiences that I think would be interesting. So the first, I'll just grab one, off the shelf and talk about it. So Creators Buddy, for instance. Creators Buddy is a self-serve media platform that Channel Factory, the world's largest buyer of YouTube TrueView, big Google partner, they launched a self-serve option because they wanted to start monetizing the long tail. They wanted to add value to the creator economy because of their relationship with Google, specifically YouTubers. So they wanted to give YouTube celebrities and influencers the same capabilities that Fortune 5000 companies have to run at their inventory on YouTube in a brand safe way. And they also wanted to give them the opportunity to boost their own videos, grow their subscribers, perform their brand deals, et cetera. So, where I started out was very simple, looking for the creator economy, right? So anybody involved in the creator economy. So that might be a company that targets YouTubers as people that are their ICP and they want to do business with. Think about like Patreon or Cameo, anybody that's like trying to work with YouTubers at scale. So then I test that ICP. I go out, I use LinkedIn mainly as like my starting point because I want to have one-to-one conversations and see if that resonates. The second place that I would look for is, influencer agencies. So I want to talk to agencies that are already working with YouTubers that are running successful campaigns and then potentially would be looking for a media boosting opportunity to add an extension to their campaign, right? So I test that ICP. I want to talk to talent managers and agents because they're the ones that are negotiating these inbound deals that are coming into their client's inbox. So I test that ICP. So I think the first thing you have to do is you have to think about like, okay, what are all the different potential ICPs that could potentially move the needle for you? And then you go out and you test your messaging with each of those and see which ones are resonating. So let's get into your solution specifically, and let's talk a little bit about the qualification process that you're using today. So where do you start? Like if you, like, I know you're working your warm network, and that's what I call the sniper rifle approach, right? You're going through your Rolodex and you're having one-to-one conversations with people you already know, or you at least have a baseline relationship. But let's pretend LinkedIn didn't exist and you were starting as a junior AE for this company for the very first time, and you didn't have a book of business, you didn't have those relationships. Who do you think you would start to talk to first? Like, what would that ICP look like?
Yeah, what group of people would I talk to, right?
Yeah, like who would you want to build a relationship with to evangelize your services? When I think about Harmon Brothers style advertising, or if I think about the stuff that, some of the other competitors set, the guys that did ads for Purple, come to mind. And Dollar Shave obviously was an early example, and everybody and their mother tried to successfully do a version of Dollar Shave, after that initial campaign. But there's a type of advertiser that does Harmon Brothers style ads. Most of the time it's a direct to consumer company. I'm thinking about like Squatch Soap. I'm thinking about Manscaped. I'm thinking about Poopery. I'm thinking about Squatty Potty. I'm thinking about brands that don't take themselves too seriously. They're willing to have fun, and they're willing to use one of the three big drivers of earned media, which is humor, right? So Channel Factory, taking a step back, when I was running more of their mainstream offering, when I was running the West Coast and the Midwest, I used to do a keynote presentation called How to Go Viral. And I hated it, and I always teed it up. I always teed it up by like, hey, like there is just the whole title of this keynote is actually a big false flag. You can't go viral, but there are three things that you can do to give yourself the best possible chance of generating earned media. It's make people cry, make people laugh, and make people ask, was that real? Like what I just watched, right? Those are three elements that I saw would oftentimes generate a lot of earned media. So I know that's a little bit diving into the weeds, but I imagine there's a certain type of brand that, like based on the fact that they do B2B, or maybe their marketing is a little bit more stodgy and performance driven, like there's probably a group of people that are definitely not going to hire you to do their video. So what are some of the attributes of the ICP from like a brand sensibility perspective, maybe a vertical perspective, size of company? Like what are some of the things that you think would essentially qualify somebody that they would be a good fit for Buck Wild?
So I think that Harmon Brothers would qualify them different than we qualify. I mean, Harmon Brothers are always qualified for scale. They would call it basically because a lot of times their deals were, I'm going to help you do marketing, but I have to. In a lot of cases, they would be part owners of the companies.
Wow,
Right? They would get
that was part
ownership.
of their model, huh?
They would. I think they would get some. They would. So it was. So they really, their skin was in the game a lot of times. And they're going for big, I think they shifted to more like, look, we don't want to waste our time with small startups. We want to go with the big brands. Whereas I think our thing is to be extremely agile. So we know that more than ever, especially now during the economy, people are looking for performance. So yeah, sure, I can spend $500,000 for this commercial, but what, did it sell my product at the end of the day? Did it actually work? And so a lot of times, given that technology is faster, you can produce things with, as little as an iPhone now, with the new, multiple camera things that they set up now, is that you can actually be scrappy, try your concepts, test your concepts, prove them out, and then say, look, we did this with my as a direct, I was a director at Union Rescue Mission. We did that. We had 10 iterations of ads to try to find the sweet spot message so that we would actually spend more for a specific spot that was specific. So a couple of, this is a long answer to your question, but a couple of clients, for example, that we have used, right? The clients, one case study is a competitor to Crumble. It's called Dirty Dough.
Oh, nice.
So what's happening?
Crumble is the cookie dough company, right?
It's a cookie company. They're really expensive cookies, but they're like super addictive and extremely, delicious.
Yep.
And Dirty Dough is a little bit more delicious, right? But right. So what happened is Crumble started suing Dirty Dough because they said, hey, you're copying our boxes, the color of our boxes, and then what we did is we actually created commercials indirectly kind of highlighting the absurdity of the lawsuit. Like you can't use cute boxes, and you can see the thing in Dirty Dough. And so, but that buzz, it was on the news. It was called the Cookie Wars, Cookie Wars, I think it was called, particularly in the Utah area. And they, in our 3-month relationship, they went from 70 franchises to 300 franchises.
Wow.
Right? Because you're capitalizing on that. Hey, let's do something. We have a fictional cookie company, and how they're going after little kids on the streets that are selling cookies. Right. And then I'm like, he's like, I'm a lawyer, and he goes, my dad's a lawyer, and they get really scared. So it's just really fun things like, but it really created buzz. It caught on. I think the news outlets saw it, and so equivalency, right? We gave them a lot more eyeballs than just the viral stuff that grew on YouTube and on Facebook, particularly on Facebook. That's a client, right? Right now.
So let's dissect this case study, because I think it's fascinating, and I think it would actually create additional, like this might be a prospecting. This might be a campaign just in itself. Okay, you'll have to tell me if I'm going too far out on a limb here, but this isn't the first story that I've heard about a company taking a legal issue and turning it into a marketing campaign. It actually happens quite often because it's a great opportunity, because like you're talking about, it's an opportunity to poke fun. It's an opportunity to generate a lot of earned media and PR in addition to creating a marketing campaign. And a lot of times it's actually a big company going after a small company. So to give you an example, I interviewed Jake Carls, who's the chief executive officer of Midday Squares. They're a company based in Canada that's the fastest growing healthy chocolate brand in the world right now. And they created a flavor and packaging that looked very much like a Kit Kat. And, they got completely just Mars came after them, full bore, cease and desist, the whole 9 yards. And they were smart enough to turn that into a marketing opportunity. And they talked about it at every moment that they possibly could. And they ended up doing a diss track, like talking about getting sued by Mars. And it was like a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So like, you don't want to create I don't think you would create an entire company based on the idea that you're just going to go out and create interesting videos and commercials around lawsuits, but it is a campaign. So let's just give it a try. So I'm going to share my screen for a second. So we'll invite the audience in to take a peek. So I want to just do a quick Google search and see if we can find other. Are you seeing my Google screen right now?
Yep, I see your Google screen.
Okay, awesome. So let's try this. So let's try marketing lawsuits. News. Kansas AG is suing Pfizer because of some vaccine issue. So probably a little bit too intense, to go after that one. All right, here's one about illicit dealings by Glass House. Like that's that company that I think tells people whether it's good to work there, right? You've got talc powder. Like, are there brands out there that are creating an alternative to talc powder, because that's now something that is not that there's lawsuits around. Critics claim disconnect with grocery markets. So, like you'd have to start kind of digging in more than just doing like a, labeling lawsuit, reshaping sustainable seafood marketing. That's a huge, that's a huge one, right? Like I don't know.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. I don't know how many marketers I've talked to that have said, hey, we had to change our labeling. Or do you remember when Oatly got sued for like calling themselves milk because they weren't actually made from like the Dairy Association went after them? Like that's another example, right? Like there are like Starbucks is sued for allegedly deceptive marketing of 100% ethically sourced. So what are coffee companies that you could go out that are doing ethically sourced, that are willing to stand up and like poke fun at Starbucks for potentially not living up to their brand claim? Like you've got a bunch of really cool, really cool stuff in here where you could essentially like not only create vertical expertise, because you guys have already gone out there and worked with a client and you've leveraged this very specific tactic of, taking a lawsuit, turning that into a marketing campaign, making it really impactful, but then using that more than just a marketing and advertising campaign. It becomes a PR campaign and becomes a much bigger stunt. So that's an example of like, there's an adage in advertising that 2 clients are a conflict, 3 is a specialty, right? So the idea is that, if I work with 2 pet companies, then I'm in conflict because I can't work with 2 pet companies at the same time. But if I work with 3 pet companies, now I'm a pet agency and I can work with only pet companies, or I can work with 10 or 20 or 50 pet companies. So if you were to take this kind of particular brand of marketing, which is crisis communications, and you're able to take negative PR and or law, and don't even limit it to like lawsuits, right? Maybe the idea is you're just coming in and you're taking advantage of a moment where a brand is having bad PR or some type of attack, something's happening to them, which would be considered a crisis, which is generally a social media moment or an inflection point in their brand journey. Something's happened to them that's bad. And you are coming in as the guy who's going to like, not only be like, hey, it's okay. Like, this is a setback. I know it sucks. You're getting some fire right now. You're getting some heat. There's some negative things happening, but the number one thing that will earn you back trust and loyalty is if you're willing to admit your mistakes, be humble as a brand, and then try and bring some sense of humor to the situation, right? So now you're taking this idea of like the lawsuit thing and you're opening up your window, you're opening up your aperture for that potential prospect. You're saying, we don't just help people when they get sued, we help people when they have bad PR moments, or we help people when they have disasters, or we have people when they have their supply chain. Like that opens you up to a way bigger group of advertisers, because there's something bad happening to a company every single day of the week. You know, there's negative. There people are running up against brick walls. Things are happening, and at that moment, they want somebody to come alongside them and say, "Hey, you know, this sucks." Like they want that empathy. They want people to acknowledge that like this is really hard, especially founders, right? If you're talking about like an early stage companies, like founders are stressed out in that moment. And if you can come alongside them and say, "Hey, look, we understand this sucks. This is a bad situation, but what our company specializes in is taking bad situations, turning that into good marketing, turning that into good PR, and you can go out there and overcome this, and we can be your partner in that." That's an incredibly powerful story.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you're making a bunch of sparks happen in my mind. I mean, just this week, for example, you have to be careful not to death scroll, but we are guilty of death scrolling. Like, oh, there's something else this one. So I run into this one thing where I think somebody brought it up, something about shampoo and how he'll color grade who distributes the shampoo, and they were all like major corporations like BlackRock, all these, and it was all red for all the shampoos. But the thing that made it even more outlandish was that as he researched these companies, most of the shampoos we use at Target and at Walmart are actually being sued for causing your hair to fall, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness! And he went down the line. He goes, here's a, he like tracked down. There's a lawsuit. Oh, there's a lawsuit for that. Like, just actually, I don't want to mention their names. Like, allegedly, right? I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But but the point was, like, man, I was like, and I remember at that point, I'm like, man, I don't want my I'm like, man, I don't want my family to get be putting those chemicals. I don't trust that stuff, because I talked to my wife about like we should just use soap, because I'm a guy, whatever. But while I'm doing that, I actually went and I looked and I said, hey, what products don't have those? And there was only like 5 companies, and their shampoo was more expensive. But I was like, wait, but I'm gonna pay a little bit more, so my daughter's not putting, or my I have $2, my wife, and of course my my boys, but. So, but again, as I'm talking, I'm like, dude, I should actually totally go after these companies, the 5 brands that I looked up, and say, guys,
you go after them. You share that video that you found, because it was probably from a third party source or like an influencer or something like that. So they might be sitting there, and they might be just as aware of the problem that you're talking about, and they're sitting there jumping up and down. They're like, man, we know that all these other companies are putting things in their products that are bad for their consumers. We're doing the right thing, but we just don't know how to get that message out there. We're not good at that. We're good at making shampoo that's safe for people, but we're not good at telling our story. And that's where a production company like you can the other thing is that outreach is so relevant, right? Like the big issue right now is noise, right? Like I'm guilty of it. I'm running several automated marketing messages in the background right now. Today, I'll reach out to 200 people just with you and me on the phone, right? I reach out to 500 people in my database programmatically every single day. And really what that is that's just me at a high level, just kind of touching base with people, right? I'm happy if 1 out of 200 a day responds and says, yes, they want to take a meeting, because those are net new people. And I'm happy if, 2 people out of the 500 in my database are like, oh yeah, thanks for touching base. Let's chat. Right. But then you're getting down to the sniper rifle. It's what I call like the elephant gun, is like where you're going out and you're just scale, right? You're just spraying and praying a little bit to some degree. Some sales people out there will tell me, or some sales leaders will say that you should never do that. But I believe sales is still a numbers game. So you have to have that high frequency, low touch outreach happening kind of in a way that's automated, that's just kind of doing its job without you as the salesperson even being involved that much, until somebody leans your way. But then you get the sniper, after you get that high touch emails and high touch or that mass approach to your audience, after you get that stuff out, that's when you go out and what I call sniper rifle, right? So now you're taking situations, right? You're taking a trigger moment. You're not just reaching out to somebody because you could reach out to them 365 days of the year with a message that would look no different today than if you reached out to them in 75 days. You are reaching out to them because of a specific moment in time. It's a trigger, right? It's timely. It's based on something that is currently trending on social media. Some influencer put out this report. There are things happening. They're probably aware of it. If they're not, they would probably be appreciative that you share that information with them. They would probably want to know who that influencer is that's out there telling their product story without them even knowing about it. And then you're coming to them with a solution and saying, hey, look, we help you tell your story, and we help take these complicated, oftentimes issues that are kind of a drag, and we turn them into funny, interesting marketing stories. So the more that I think about it, the more that I think about you guys are a responsive agency that can help create content for brands that need to get their story out there because of some moment, some moment, and it's what you call like responsive marketing or real-time marketing, right? You're diving into that world of creating content based on the news cycle or what's happening on social media and stuff like that. So from a qualification perspective, this won't be the only time you'll do this exercise, but walking through that case study, I look at what you did for that client and I say, that's a extremely sticky ICP. That's a ideal customer profile that it's a point of differentiation, right? There's a lot of production companies out there. There's a lot of people that say they can create video for you. There's not a lot of production companies. There's probably a small handful of production companies that can say, hey, we took a moment in time that should have been a bad thing for our client and we turned it into a good thing, and we turned it into a lot of earned media. So I think that's a unique point of differentiation that you should definitely lean into. And then your qualification actually becomes pretty simple. It's, can I find a story to focus on that gives me a list of brands to go out and talk to about, like that example with the shampoo company, right? That's great because it's even more generic. It's not calling out a specific company. It's more calling out an industry. So you can go, okay, boom, shampoo. Today's my shampoo day. I've got this great piece of content that's talking about what a group of CPG companies are doing wrong. Now I've got a list of 5 companies that I know is doing right. I'm gonna come up with a little pitch that's like, hey, did you like what I would like? I always start with a question in my outreach, and I think the important thing is, when you ask a question, you're not asking your prospect to answer it. You're answering it for them in the rest of your email, right? So subject line is incredibly important. Like I would put something like, did you know that, these companies are doing XYZ, based on the research that you had just done within that particular segment. The next thing that I would look at is asking them a question, so the subject line, ask them a question, and then you ask them a question in the email. Then you link to that, this influencer XYZ who has X amount of followers on Instagram said that these companies are doing this sketchy thing. Link to it. Next line, I did some research because I'm interested as a consumer, what brands are not doing this sketchy thing. You came up in that research. And then maybe compliment them on that. Like, congratulations for being one of 5 companies that I can find that actually doesn't put this harmful product in their product, doesn't put this harmful ingredient in their product. That's really cool. Like, I'm actually going to support you. You're on my consideration to buy list now because of what you're doing. For some reason, I couldn't find much in your marketing about, this topic. Have you ever considered really leaning into that in your storytelling? Here's an example of something that we did for Dirty Dough, where we took a negative situation in the media and actually turned it into a massively successful advertising campaign. In addition, it generated a ton of PR value, right? So that is the creme de la creme outreach. Now, the problem is, can you get it to, can you break the wall, right? So from there, I mean, I would go full court press on something like that. I would basically do this. I would go, all right. All right. So, what do you remember? One of the shampoo companies that that you were researching that does that's one of the good ones. Can you hear me still, John? Did you go on mute? Yeah. For some reason, I can't hear you anymore. Hello. Okay. My volume, my levels are still good. How about now? Yeah, for some reason I can't hear you, man. Did something mute maybe on your end potentially? Let me see if it's my audio. Hello, 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 hello.
Can you hear me now?
Got you. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
let
my
me flip.
system resets for some reason sometimes. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So let me flip back to this. So do you remember like one of the shampoo companies that maybe
Yes.
Okay, so
One of the companies is called. It has a really interesting name. It's called Biotin, Biotin.
Okay, so let me know if this is right. Biotin shampoo.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, I wonder if they're part of like a larger holding company or something like that. All right, I'm going to do my example, which is Dr.
Oh, you know what? It's Maple Holistics. That's the parent company.
Maple Holistics. Got it. Okay, great. So Farmingdale, New Jersey, personal product manufacturing. So I'll find the company. Then I will, actually, I'm going to go back one. So usually from here, it'll show you like, so let's go to people. All right. So usually from here, you can get to the employees. So you'll see how many followers they have. Then if you click at this 2 to 10, you'll have employees. Let me refresh because I'm not getting pictures. All right. Well, my system's probably slowed down a little bit because we're on a live stream. But what I'll probably do from here is look at literally every single person here, who would make sense. It's a small enough list. It's only 23 people. So I would start reaching out to these guys one at a time, with that particular outreach message that you talked about. Sometimes I'll use LinkedIn and I'll just send them a connection request and put the message in the connection request. So you can just ping this up, pull up the connection request and do something, kind of simple that's under 300, under 300 characters. You can obviously also send an in-mail. I'm out of in-mails right now, waiting for July to roll through because I'm pretty active on here. And then, do you use like any kind of premium version of LinkedIn?
Yeah, right now I'm using the Sales Navigator.
Okay, great. So I have not ever used Sales Navigator, I'm sad to say, but basically I have a version of that which is a premium profile. So it lets me send in-mails, connect to people. But if you've got Sales Navigator, that's probably even better than the view that I'm seeing, and you can probably hammer through this list of people pretty quickly.
Yeah,
So,
we're using an automated system that like where I can actually look by region with this. Like, so I search it within LinkedIn. I copy the link and then put it into the software, and it'll actually create. We can actually customize messages, like first message, second message, fourth message,
Wow.
automate it so that it follows up, right? So the first message is just an ad. Once they add me, then I send them a link that says, "Hey, I bet you're doing amazing things over there," right? It's just a really simple, like, and a lot of times they'll respond, "Yeah, we are doing amazing things." And once they respond, then I can just talk to them like a regular human being, and just kind of see where they're at with their different things. But if they don't respond, it actually spams them.
Oh,
They'll add me, and then I'll send them one message, and then it actually does five. And what's interesting, and it does a lot. Like, I think but it limits it, but you have to have the version that I just said within LinkedIn. But what happens there is, you can only do up to 2,500, and it has all the rules so that you're not looked at in spam. What I found out was interesting. You talked about this too. That out of I mean, out of hundreds of sends, I had one person get mad at me.
wow.
Right. One person said, "Hey, stop, this is too much." Something. So so for me, it's like, well, that's actually really, really good. I mean, I'm sad
Yeah.
that that guy got mad at me. He's probably never
Sure.
gonna want to work with me because
Yeah.
he doesn't like getting messages.
Yep.
But I'm telling you, like, I've sent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of those by now, and no one has complained. I would have complained. I would have been like, "Dude, can hey, stop." I get mad when people do that to me. But the thing that I always remind people, because we're very we think everybody sees everything through our eyes, right? You don't
Right.
understand, people are different than us. Like, I would say, I hate it when people knock on the door and try to sell me products, right? It's like, okay, I actually don't mind. I like it when people come in. It's kind of nice, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just personality. It's like, yes, you're right. If people are like you, or people were like me, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to talk to you if you try to sell me something.
Yeah.
But
No.
there has been the rare occasion where the person that reached out to me had what I needed, right?
Yeah. No, I
I'm like,
love
wait a
that.
minute. Oh, okay, yeah, let's talk or whatever.
I
So,
want to ask you. I'm going to derail for just a second because I think you're in a unique position to talk about this. So, I know that there's a lot of crossover between the sales world and eventually what I would call people start at the agencies and then they cross over to being in a business development role. So I think, that's a fairly that's a fairly frequent strategy for guys like me that are trying to build out a media sales team, right, for the companies that I'm doing that. So I'll usually look for like three types of employees when I'm building a sales team. One, I'm going to hire guys like me, right? Guys that have been biz dev facing and doing that side of it for their entire career. They've got a book of relationships. They've proven that they can at least hit quota somewhere to stick around for a year or two. They have some skill set. They've got a book of business, and they can, and gosh, man, I'm actually the worst at hiring because I think because I'm a salesperson, I have to be eternally optimistic, and I almost find a reason to hire every salesperson I interview. So, because I always want to think like, oh yeah, this guy, doesn't matter what happened before, like he's gonna be able to pull it off. And the sad truth is, there's an 80-20 rule in sales. 20% of the salespeople generate 80% of the revenue, and all the other guys, just kind of fell into it, and they just bounce from place to place to place. So then there's the next group, which is what I call the farm team, right? So this is like I'm hiring kids right out of school, generally, or entry level as an SDR, as basically like a meeting and appointment setter, or basically someone who can kind of do chores for me, essentially. But the idea is that they're young, they are ambitious, they have a work ethic. They don't have relationships, but they are willing to be coached. They're willing to learn, and they're willing to grind it out and hopefully make it to that next level and become an AE. The sad part about that strategy is that I think a lot of recruiters look for my SDRs and hire them because they know they're good. So, if you're not a company that has the brand cachet and the money to keep your SDRs intact, that can be heartbreaking, to be honest, because, you spend a year and a half training somebody, and then then they jump ship to your competitor. And Probably that speaks a little bit to me as a sales leader, because if I was a great boss, they wouldn't have left. But that'll be a topic for another show. So the third type is a guy like you, right? This is a guy who has spent a nice chunk of his career in the agency space, right? So the reason that I bring that up is I want to ask you, as someone who's been on the receiving end, like I met you from a sales interaction, right? I can't remember if I reached out to you or if I reached out to one of your colleagues that worked on State Farm, back at Direct Partners, but somehow I got in touch with like you and the team, right? As someone who sat on the agency side and been on the receiving end of so much sales outreach, how do you take that into your role as a business development person? And how do you kind of think about your own experience of being sold to quite often? And how do you translate that into how you approach being a good biz dev person?
Well, I think I would sound like that and family and having kids, and I'll explain later. But uh, the I think initially I just think hopefully as human beings we're growing as people, right? You're a certain way, rigid, and it benefits you to be that way because then you do a really good job at a specific thing. And I think what we have is, and I'm working on my master's degree in business, and I think they have there's a quadrant, right? It's I always forget the Cameron and I forget the writers Cameron and oh gosh, I always forget her name, but I remember the Joker's girlfriend is called the Joker from DC Comics. What's her name?
Yeah, I kind of I think I know who you're talking about, like Harley Quinn.
Yeah, Quinn.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's Cameron and Quinn wrote the book, and I always forget the name. It's Cameron and Quinn. It's 4 quadrants, and they call it value quadrants, like what you value, and so at different stages of companies, they're always in one of those quadrants. A startup, for example, will be extremely agile and they value agility, but there's no procedures and systems. But then when they grow, I think Apple's usually the one that they use. When they grow, they need systems. If you have 10,000 employees, you need systems. And so that changes the dynamic and that changes who's important within the company. And so going back to your questions in sales, I feel like back in the day, I was very much convinced that data would solve everything and only data was important. Data was the thing that was going to save the world. And then after, when you get really into the weeds of everything and you talk to a bunch of PhD analysts, after a while, you're like, man, a lot of this stuff is like, that's actually not true. It's kind of it's borderline bunk. It's like it's great directionally, great, it shows you, but a lot of stuff doesn't add up. At the end of the day, you have to look at how much money is in my bank. You're telling me I made $1 million, but there's only $200,000 in my bank. Oh, we're double triple counting, right? And so stuff like that, and you learn and you have this sense like I want to protect the brand. I want to use people that are going to help me improve. And so there's almost like this false sense that technology was going to it was going to be like a money printer, right? But then as you grow, you realize that look, you can use that technology directionally, and you can move and adjust and do things way faster than you could ever do it in the past. But really, everything is driven by story, right? And so, if you talk to John Lockmer 15 years ago, you have to show me how good your technology was, and also I knew what people. I was savvy enough to knew what different companies were doing.
Yeah.
So I would hang out with somebody like, oh, I was like, the guy's like, oh, we can do that too. We just need blah, 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 blah. Oh, we can do that too. Like when YouTube started, and I proved it. Like I would show, I have 300,000 views for my wedding dance, right? Because I played with you, because I just wanted to show people I could do it. I could change the keywords, move different things, and make it work. And so I just did that just to show them like I can do it. It's not, or the other one was, if you launch something, you could put media into it at 1 a.m. in the morning so that it would trend, right? That was a big thing, but they changed it, right? So little things like that, and companies were started doing that. But so that person that 14 years ago, you had to prove yourself. You had to prove that your company is really bringing something new, is bringing something that we cannot do. And for the most part, a lot of it was copy of someone else, and a lot of it was the same pitch, right? It's the same. How are you different than me?
A real point of differentiation that is tangible. And I think the other thing you pointed to is the syndrome of like, we do all things for all people, right? Like a lot of sales guys will just be like a client will lean their way and be like, well, what about, channel management? They're like, oh yeah, we can do that. And they like have never done it. And they're going to just like go and figure it out. Right. It's like, don't be all things to all people.
Well, a lot of agencies are like that too, right? I'm not going to name anyone, but I would be I would be like in meetings, we're pitching a business that we had no business pitching, but it's like, hey, once we get the money, we'll do it. And we're not talking. It wasn't like, oh, this is like hundreds of, like, it was they were like really, really big accounts. And for me, like, ethically, I'm like, we can't, I mean, you got like, at the time, I was like, I know how to do that, but nobody that is coming from this other team knows how to do what you guys are doing. And it's like a lot of heavy lifting. Like, I would literally have to live at the company to do what they were thinking about doing. Anyhow, so that's part of it. And I think but as I grew as a person, right? It's like it's story. How can we? And I realized it's just different. There's different dynamics. There were instances where I thought this company's not going to help us. But a lot of times this relationship helped us in different ways that I thought they would help us.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
And I was just looking at numbers. I was just looking at this, that, but then I realized, wait. They're because we're working with this other company, this other stuff is happening, right? Or we have these other partnerships because we started working with them that are kind of added value that we didn't have, right? Or from a brand standpoint, right? A lot of people don't understand that, like a lot of the holding companies get such great discounts that you can't really compete against them, right? So they're getting something that most people pay 20% for, they're getting it 10%. So even if they charge you 10%, it's a wash. You're literally getting a whole agency to work with you with what it would cost you to do it directly, because Google's not even going to pick up the phone and talk to you because you're not doing their volume. So little things like again, there's also the numbers game, the margins, like little things you can change, little things you can twitch. Where in an agency, we only have so much budget, right? We have to allocate it, and at the end of the day, we're going to be held accountable with what that budget is. It's different, but so I think you've talked about some of the issues, but now a lot of it is how do we I think understanding that, yes, I can do everything, but it's impossible for me to do everything. So I need partners. Who's going to be that partner that's going to make us look amazing or stellar or great, right? Who's going to be able to? And a lot of times it was like because a lot of times I feel like we're arrogant, and I can figure everything out, but I can't physically, especially with like as we get older, do everything at the same time. So then it's like, you know what? It would be better for me to hire specialists, real specialists that can show me they know what they're doing.
Right? To do all things for all people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so you have to, I mean, this guy's been writing for 50 years, right? And he's and so can we compete with that? Look at his track record, his performance metrics and the direct response, right? And I've done that too with a lot of decision makers, and it's been interesting how ego sometimes get in the way with it, right? So I say, look, I have an old boss who's a mentor of mine that'll come in and give us free advice on what we need to produce for a direct response commercial, right? And the person didn't do it. And I'm like, what?
That's crazy. Well,
or I know the guy that averages 30 to 50 million buying in direct response. Let's talk to him and how to do direct response, because he's obviously been successful for multiple years for multiple direct response clients. No, like, because those things to me are like that's saying, look, I'm going to step out of my I have expertise in certain channels. I don't have expertise in traditional media buying, but I know the number one guy in LA. I can call him like, hey dude, I'm doing this buy. Does this make sense? Is this a good deal? Are they, and his seal of approval is like, and so I think it changes. Yeah.
Well, I think what I heard from you is a few things. I think one is that there's an art and a science to everything we do. Whether it's executing campaigns or whether you're on the business development side, trying to build relationships. The science piece of it is what you talked about. It's data, right? It's some of the things that we talked about today. What I think was really exciting about this session with you, John, is that we got down to the insight, right? Like we only looked at one case study one particular client that you've worked with. So I don't want to make general broad assumptions about the types of work that you guys do and who you can do it for. But based on that case study, we revealed an insight, and that insight is that you guys are able to take moments of crisis and turn them into marketing gold and turn them into a PR win. That's a huge insight. So then we looked at the data, right? We looked at, okay, what are some sources of data that we can use to mine that data to find the right prospects to go tell that story to. So we looked at Google News, which upon further, real vetting of that, I mean, we barely looked at, 3 or 4 headlines, but if we really dug into that data, I bet we could find some really interesting pitches and proposals to come up with to go out and talk to potential clients about. And then we also looked at the, kind of the social media, data signal, right? So doom scrolling, I agree with you. There's an algorithm out there and it's trying to kill you. But if you are willing to go into it with eyes wide open and know that, it's research too, right? Especially for guys like you and me that are in the industry. So if you go out with a specific intention, like, hey, I'm just going to open up TikTok or I'm going to open up Instagram and I'm going to flip through it until I find one of these kind of trendy influencer-led, personality-led pieces that are talking about a particular industry, and then I can use that as social proof for my outreach on the strategy that I'm trying to talk about. One of the things that I do with social is I don't really just go and doom scroll because, like, God knows what my algorithm, my algorithm is so weird. It's like I'm on there, I use it often for clients, right? So one week I'm looking for influencers in San Diego for my wine client, and then the next week I'm looking for real estate agents for Creators Buddy on TikTok, and then the next week I'm looking at pastors, and then the next week I'm looking at knee replacement surgery for this potential client that I'm working with called Forma Medical that does medical tourism down in Tijuana. So my algorithm is jacked up because I'm always, searching for interesting things that are completely irrelevant to who I am as a person, but very relevant to who I am as a business person. So what I do is instead of just straight doom scrolling, I'll put in a keyword and then I'll go to Reels and then I'll look at the stuff that's trending amongst that keyword. So that might be a good place for you to look at for those data signals. And then I think, we talked about the data piece, and then the art piece of it is how do you frame it, right? How do you get somebody to open up the email? How do you ask a question to get them to lean in, not to ask them a question that they're going to answer, but a question that you're going to answer in the rest of your pitch? Then how do you use the science piece of like LinkedIn and Sales Navigator to find the right people to talk to? And how do you create a process through programmatic tools? So maybe you're not having to do the heavy lifting. You set it up one time and then you forget about it until somebody leads your way. By the way, what was the name of that tool?
Man, I'd have to look it up. You know what? This has been a bad week. My phone died.
Uh-huh.
And you know how I had an Apple phone and they have to text yourself. Well, I can't text myself on a phone that I can't use. And then I go, it's like, oh, I can't do anything. And then I go to the center. I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy a phone. Let me do it. And they're like, oh, we can't verify your ID. I'm like, what?
Oh my gosh.
Their scanner was like, they couldn't scan and I spent two anyhow. I can't do a lot of things without my phone. It's really frustrating.
Well,
I could have looked it up in 5 seconds and told you this is the tool that I use right now.
Well, when you find it, go back to this episode on LinkedIn or wherever and put it in the comments, because that's a big thing that I'm excited about, is kind of like learning from other sales. I mean, hopefully I was able to be helpful to you with a few ideas today. But hey, man, you were very helpful to me too. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination the guru. I'm just a guy who's been doing this to some degree of success for 2 companies over my 15-year career. And I learn every single day from colleagues. And what I learned from you, in addition to what we just went through, which I think is kind of the crux of this episode, I want to call, data or art meets science and how you find your prospects. But then I think the other thing that I really love that I learned from you about today was like, how do you hack events through leveraging the cause marketing element? The fact that VidCon gives an 80% discount to nonprofits. I think that's great. And not only that, it's just a great fit way to give back. And like, if you're partnering with a nonprofit, they're getting exposure, they're getting value, and they're getting to be there too. So I love that idea. I'm definitely going to use that one. So, John, this was really fun. I got a lot of value out of this. I hope you did too. I'm excited to continue to do more of these live sales trainings. I've never been a sales trainer outside, at least in the media industry. I've not been a sales trainer outside of building sales teams and training my own people. And I think to some degree, I'm probably guilty of not doing a good job at that, because I've always been very much like a player coach, like somebody that's out there generating sales and generating value for the companies that I'm working for while building the team. I'm usually selling. And I think because, I came up through the entertainment industry where it was like, working at a talent agency where they used to throw phones at your head and stuff like that. And, my perspective on sales training has always been, all right, here's a telephone, here's an email account, go learn by doing the work. So I've been very like sink or swim, I suppose, in my training based on the way that I was brought up. I don't think that that's the right way to train this current generation. I think they need a lot more hand-holding and mentoring. So it's something that I need to get better at as a sales leader. So I'm excited to workshop it with you. And for those, well, John, anything else you want to plug today, or where people can get in touch with you if they want to talk to you about what you guys are doing over at Buck Wild?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead and hit me up at john@buckwild.agency. john@buckwild.agency. I can definitely, give you guys a rundown of the different clients we had success with. And I mean, this is unrelated to sales at all, but anything related to ad tech, I pretty much have played with everything and anything, and I could probably help you with that, because it's just always, it's in the back of my mind. So
I love it, man. Well, you've always been a great client and a fun colleague to work for, so I'm glad we're doing this. So for those of you at home, if you got any value from the conversation that I had with John today, feel free to share the episode with a friend. This won't go up on the VOD on the Spotify, because this is more of a sales training specific episode. So I won't put this on the VOD, but if you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, wherever you're watching on social media, if you follow us or have the opportunity to rate us on those platforms, that's how we find a larger audience organically. So John, I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m. if that works for you.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.